Care. I've not mentioned much in the way of problems with our easy to grow vegetable selection. And it would be fair to say that just by keeping up with simple tasks of watering and feeding, the plants will remain healthy and strong. Healthy plants, like healthy people, can fight off minor ailments without too much damage done. And following a few guidelines of good housekeeping in the garden, many issues will be met face on and nothing will become too problematic. Slugs and snails may possibly be your biggest nuisance visitor. Grit or eggshells around the base of the plant can help deter damage by these wee slinking culprits. Copper tape wrapped around the rim of the pots will give them an electric zap that will send them slithering. And well, if you're concerned that they go out on a high, maybe a bear trap would be a happier solution for their ending. Attracting garden birds into the garden, along with frogs and toads, and thrushes especially love slugs. And these creatures, the frogs and toads and birds, are a natural way of controlling the numbers. You could try making a small wildlife pond out of an old dish basin. We've got a fact sheet showing how to do that. And it will surprise you how quickly the wildlife will be drawn in and help fight your corner against the unwelcome visitors. Watering. Moisture is required by all growing plants, but in varying quantities. And how and when the water is applied can play a big part in the success of growing that vegetable. Most vegetables require a fairly consistent supply of water, and especially tomatoes. Inconsistent watering can cause cracking in the tomato skins, and whilst this visual blemish might not stop you from choosing to eat the tomato itself, the open wound can be more susceptible to attracting bugs and harbouring diseases. And whilst we can't control rainfall from above, if growing, like the rainfall outside, if growing your vegetables outdoors in the patio, it's good practice to always water directly onto the compost. When you are watering with your watering can or a hose, use the spout that can go directly onto the compost, like what you can see in the middle picture here. And if you're using a hose, use a plain soft jet of water if you're using one of those hoses with a fancy head. Spraying water around the compost can dislodge and help spread soil and airborne pathogens. So if possible, avoid during the middle of the day to avoid water evaporating from the surface of the compost. Morning is the best time to do it, with later in the evening the next preferred time. To encourage strong root growth, we're wanting the roots to grow down the way. It's better to give a good soak to wetten more depth of compost every couple of days than doing a little every day. The far right image shows tomato blight, and this is an airborne fungal disease which is most prevalent is more obvious about in moist, warm conditions. Chocolate brown blotches are on the leaves and stems can be the first signs, and it will eventually move to the tomatoes themselves. If you do spot these chocolate spots arising, remove all the damaged material, but don't add it to your compost heap. If you can burn, if you're allowed to, if you've got the facility to do that, burn them to get rid of it or take it to the recycling centre. And unfortunately, if blight does take hold, generally the whole plant will eventually collapse with the crop wasted. There are no real deterrents to the airborne pathogens that cause this, but keeping the foliage of the tomato plant as dry as possible, and that's where your watering comes into it. Always water into the compost. If you can keep the tomato plant as dry as possible, the foliage of the tomato plants as dry as possible. This can help deter the pathogen spores from germinating and spreading. Grey mould is a fairly common disease. It causes a kind of soft kind of decay on the stems, and you'll recognise it by its general grey fuzziness. It's especially likes humid conditions. So again, avoid splashing around of excess water in the greenhouse or on hot days outside. And this can help stop the mould from taking hold. Always ensure there's good ventilation if you're growing in a greenhouse. Second picture is of powdery mildew, and it's a white mould that can appear on both sides of the leaves, especially during drier weather conditions outdoors, and can be caused by inconsistent watering indoors, I guess outdoors as well, where like you're creating periods of prolonged dry periods of dryness. Poor circulation can help lead to the powdery mildew. So if it's warm and muggy outdoors, keep your pots apart so that the air can circulate round about them. And if you are growing indoors, keeping the doors and then opening the greenhouse in the greenhouse will definitely help improve the airflow. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is aphids, the wee blighters, greenfly, and they especially like soft new growth. So young plants are more susceptible to their damage. What they do is they suck the sap, which if your plants are healthy, and despite them being young, if they're still healthy, it'll probably not cause too much damage, but the problem is they leave a sticky residue that can attract other nasty bugs along that will do far more damage. And they can spread viruses and disease picked up elsewhere. So best to get rid of your aphids and be done with it. You can hose them off with insecticidal soap, but I don't. I just find that having my wee resident army of natural predators close by helps keep numbers under control. So things like ladybirds, hoverflies, and even the less loved wasp, all are great natural predators for these aphids. So have a few flowering plants such as cosmos, marigolds, and alyssum nearby to attract these bugs in, and you'll just keep things nice and